it's going to only take 10 minutes. I think you're perfect for this segment because you've seen just enough behind the curtain and you've moved and sat and ate and spent time with all of us. So
Yeah.
I just want you to give kind of your 5-8 minute answer on what the perception of sponsorship was before you met and spent time with all of us and became friends with us, and what your perception of that is now. So I can kind of back into answering people's questions about how to become sponsored and all that bullshit in between.
All right. So, like, my perspective going into it was, like, you apply for, like, whatever, for a sponsorship, like either a supplement company or, like,
Whatever.
whatever fits the mold. It's that, maybe you'll get, like, some sort of kickback or some sort of service provided to you as long as you, make a post about it or whatever. Now, like, seeing how much actual work it is, it's almost like a full-time job. You have to, like, think of, your types of engagements, your posts about the product, and sometimes the companies will make it so that if you have a contract, that you have to post X amount of times during a week saying X, Y, and Z about that product. So you kind of lose a lot of your platform, to a point where it's like, is this even mine anymore? Like who am I doing it? Am I doing it myself? Am I doing it for them? So it's like another way of, like, your platform to do that. And you gotta like wonder, like, is this something I believe in? Is this product like really something I can actually get behind? That's something you need to establish, like, first. They need to trust the product. You are an actual consumer of the product first before you even, like, get your name behind it. Because I feel like you need to be a customer for at least a year for you to even being sponsored by it. And then you got to realize that, like, what you post, the content you're going to put out is going to change when you get that sponsorship.
So you touched on a couple things that I want to kind of you to dive into. When you got to meet us and you got to know us, you kind of realized how much work it really was and what's really involved, and you've kind of seen, like, the inner workings of some different ambassador programs. What with that being said, you see all the directions we're pulled in and all the different things involved. What is kind of like what was the biggest eye opener after getting a peek behind the curtain to you as someone who was just a friend, not I don't mean to say just a friend, but a guy on the outside just kind of watching, to then getting to travel around with us, peek behind the curtain and see some of it and see some of the production of it is probably the best way for me to put it. What was kind of like your biggest takeaway? Like, wow, I didn't realize this is a fucking full-time job. Was it that, or was it like, did it just look all like fun and glamorous, or what was kind of the biggest thing you kind of went home and you were like, holy shit?
It was definitely a little bit of both, I'd say. You know what I mean? The fact that it was a full-time job, and the fact that, like, Tony takes his content very seriously. I don't think a lot of people, like, really realize that. Like, when he had, like, when we were down there for that 3 days of training down in Florida, like, to have somebody come out for those 3 days to fly a drone, to take all the media, whether it was video, pictures, whatever, it was pretty big. And I think that everything that was shot during the day, and it's only condensed for, maybe like 5 or 10 minutes, and he's still got to pay that guy for all those 3 days.
It's a business. It's absolutely a business.
Yeah. And it's like, so that is, a cost that's going to come right out of his own pocket. So he's probably paying him ballpark, probably $1,000 a day, at least just to be down there. And for that 3 days, that was free for law enforcement.
Yep.
So that's coming out of Tony's own pocket. Whatever that cost of having him come down there. So it was really impressive, the fact that he had all that the media stuff there. guy with the drones. Got some great shots. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, there's no doubt it's a huge it's a job, and it's work in and of itself, and it's not something that just kind of happens, like it's whipped together. And I kind of just wanted to get your kind of commentary on it really fast and get your input. I know you're driving. Congratulations on competing. Just competing is a good thing, brother. I saw that and I thought that was fucking awesome. You laid it out perfectly. You were like, I just jumped into it a day before, like, fuck it. I mean, who gives a shit about medals and stuff like that? Like, honestly, you're just getting out there and you're just competing. And it's probably, honestly, the best thing, because it shows you how fucked up you are and how you got to get like to that next level of what you got to do. Like, it gives you a great barometer from the beginning, because you don't know how far off you are or how close you are. People walk around like, oh, I can compete. I could just jump in and do that. And then you can just say, no, I did it last week. I tried to jump in, got my ass kicked. And that's what we all do. I mean, I deal with it. I get beat up by my girlfriend every day. So it's perfect. You know what I mean? It's like, that's kind of the thing, so I think that's bravo to you, and that's a huge humbling thing, and it speaks to your character and who you are. And when you came out and trained, you just jumped in every drill, and right away you were like a first flight guy, and that's just awesome. I mean, I think you have to just sometimes say, my motto is the Tom Brady motto, which is like, just go out there and sling it. You just got to go out there sometimes and say fuck it, and that's what I've always done, and I don't care. So that's how I operate. But I think that's awesome. I think that's good points. I'll give you the last word on kind of any advice you might give somebody kind of seeking sponsorship as a guy who's been out there training a little bit. Maybe your top one or two things or takeaways, and then I'll get into my topics.
So I guess like my pet peeve is that, and I see a lot of people doing it, is kind of what gets thrown around is like being like a homie hopper.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like they jump from sponsorship. Supplement companies to products or whatever. They keep on like jumping back and forth. It's like your reputation and your name is huge,
right?
And if you don't develop some sort of brand loyalty, and if you're just willing to go to whoever's the highest bidder, it's kind of like I don't know, to me, like that just doesn't look good. I feel like I'm old-fashioned in that sense. But
maybe. I don't think you're old-fashioned in that sense. I think we're all aware of that, but I think we're also, and this is a topic I'll get into, I think we're all also aware that there's a business component to it, and there's a component of making the right business deal, and not every athlete or everybody's fortunate. Like, I was really fortunate that I got to work with Gasp and Blackstone for as many years as I did. And I'm a guy who's kind of at the tail end a little bit of my career with some of that stuff, because I'm not 25 anymore. I can't get out there, and that's just not in my makeup. So whether or not, you stay with those brands or not with those brands, people don't realize sometimes that there's more back-end components to working out the right deal behind the scenes to those deals. It doesn't make it by no means condones jumping from brand to brand to brand. We all hope we go everywhere and have these 3 to 5 year careers at minimum with some of these brands we work with. To me, that's an acceptable minimum. You should stay with a brand 3 to 5 years and work with them. And then if it becomes a point where you go your separate ways or the marketing goes a separate way, then you can't stay with them. It's just, that's the reality. You have to go to a different place. Not every brand is designed to market the best way for you. Does that mean you become what we call like a brand hoe and you jump around 9 different brands? Of course not. Nobody wants that. But if you can look back on a 20-year career, which is a fair snapshot, and you were maybe with 3 departments or less, I'd say that's a pretty good career. If you can say you were 2 or less, that's phenomenal. That's ideal. Being with 1 today in this day and age, and that is an old-fashioned thought process, is very hard, because you're always looking to upgrade. I mean, you can't say if, you don't have a dream scenario of where you want to be, and everybody sets goals, and you and I have talked about this in the past, and sometimes, the marketing changes and the direction changes, and you're not with that direction, so it all makes sense. You're not wrong. I would say my thinking has been skewed to, if you can stay with 3 brands over a 20-year period in one market segment, you're winning.
Yeah.
3 or under. If you're over 3, yeah, you run the risk of being a little bit of a hopper. But you look at a guy like Mike O'Hearn, who's had a fucking 40-year career in fitness. I can't tell you how many clothing brands, how many supplement brands he's been with, and it's never really affected him. But he's had such a long body of work that, you know, he's going to jump around, you know.
Yeah.
And I know he's not cheap.
His resume speaks for himself.
Yep.
I mean,
He has a lot of reach. He's got a lot of, you know, when he talks about something, he's a good spokesperson for that brand. So of course he's gonna up around. But we'll get into the different roles people play. I'll let you go. I'm gonna get into all those topics and kind of dissect them one by one for everybody. I'll let you go. Congratulations on competing and thanks for the input.
thanks, man.
Later.
Appreciate it.
Talk to you later.
That's it.
So there you go. So Dan, to give you some insight into Dan, Dan's a guy who's friends with some of us. He's gotten a peek behind the curtain a little bit with some things. So he kind of gets it a little bit. You know, he gets it more and more every time he's around. And he understands it, and I think his remarks are spot on. And I want to give people some insight into what somebody who spent some time with us kind of maybe had a preconceived notion of spawn. So you can see how it can start to get expensive really quickly. So when I throw these numbers around, and that's a mic that's going to require an interface, and it's not going to be a simple setup of plugging it into a USB. Now, is that going to give you such superior quality in the beginning that you have to do that? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. But it does offer some strategic advantages in the way that you're going to broadcast and how you're going to stream, and depending on, where you're streaming from and how great the feedback is and all those different things. Those are all things to take into account. Now, my number 2, or what I would call my inexpensive setup, your inexpensive setup may eventually morph into your travel setup. So I always like to think of it this way. If I'm going to do it inexpensive, let me start with almost like a travel kit. Something like the Snowball product, or some lapel mics that are pumped into the USB, which you can get between $20 and $50. So you can spend between $20 and $50 at a Best Buy or online with some good lapel mics and a plug-in system. It's not going to give you the crispy sound that people look for, but it's going to give you a start. And then that setup can become a travel setup. And I think anybody who's streaming or anybody who's in media, I mean, if you're in media in general and you go to a lot of shows and you're bopping around and you're doing a lot of different media, you should definitely have a lapel mic setup. And something like this, I'll show you guys. This is a very inexpensive $20 lapel setup, USB setup, that's a split setup. And look how long this wire is. I mean, I can plug this into a USB and be running, and be up and running and streaming. So you have to think that a setup like this can go anywhere with you. It can be, a multi-purpose setup. But if you start with it, there's nothing wrong with that if you're on a budget. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no problem with that. People will say, oh, well, you're diminishing the quality, blah, 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 blah. I don't necessarily agree. Now, there's all kinds of lapel setups out there. You can buy a Rode setup if you go to sweetwater.com, and it will run you around $199. And for those of you on YouTube, and this is part of the reason why I wanted to do this on YouTube, you can see it right here. This will run you around $199. Okay? This is a setup, and I know some of you are tuning in, and this is a really good stream for some folks, especially you Semi-Auto Kid and some of you guys that are in here, that Rode setup can be a very excellent choice for traveling, you know, and probably accomplish 99% of your needs even at home for a long time, until you reach that point where you're willing to make those types of investments, because that's not a bad setup. Now the blue snowball's good. They're usually round. I can show you guys what some of those look like. Although you have to sit kind of close to them, so they offer some slight limitations in terms of where you can go and how far away from it you can go and things like that. So anytime you get into like some of these cost-cutting mechanisms, they're going to travel well, but they may or may not be very good for what you may use them for. So that's what you have to kind of stay aware of. And you have to stay aware of the fact that you may not, it has to fit your needs. It's got to be purpose driven. Like, what's the purpose? Are you going to sit really close? Are you sitting in a hotel room? Where are you sitting? So I'll show you guys kind of what that snowball setup might look like. So it'd be something like this, you know, and it run you. Some of them are $99, some of them are about $50. You can just shop around. You can find them. They're not ridiculously expensive. So there's definitely some advantages and disadvantages to all of them. Now, if I was to say, thirdly, what would be the ideal setup, I said back in the beginning, it's going to be some in between. You're going to want to have a little of both. Like if I travel or I'm on the road, I may take this and my laptop and I'm good to go. Or I may take my snowball and I'm good to go. You know, you invest in different things as time goes on for different purposes, and you kind of build out your setups accordingly. Like, hey, I'm going to take this as a travel setup, or I'm going to take this as a fixed setup at home. And that's where we're going to get into cameras for YouTube. And I'm talking more and speaking from doing a conversational type setup. Okay? And if you have questions, ask them. But, you know, I want to get through some of this material because I think it's invaluable. And I'll get into the money aspect and the revenue and all that. Cameras get tricky. This is where you're going to spend some money. The camera I'm broadcasting on right now is a Sony 4K camera. So it's a quality camera. Can you use a webcam? Can you use a webcam 4K? Yes. But as you get into backing up your material and saving your material, or you're getting into heavier duty equipment, the camera was something I really didn't want to skimp on. And I didn't want to save, I don't want to say save money. I didn't want to do something that I was going to regret later. So I had an old Canon camera, piece of crap. It was like a $90 camera. And it was fine. It did the trick. It wasn't, you know, ideal. It wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't the setup I was like striving to have. But it got me through. But long term, you want to look at things like 4K camcorders, and nobody does it better than Sony when it comes to camcorders. And I'll pull up and I'll show you on YouTube what something like that might look like and how something like that would play in to your setup. You know, and there's some really good 1080 ones, there's some really good heavy duty ones. It just comes down to what you feel is going to meet your needs, is what's gonna hit the home run for you. and what you can afford. If you can't afford, the best camcorder out there, don't hesitate to get a 1080. Don't hesitate to get something that you can just get by, because you can always use it later as a secondary or backup camera. Now, I know what people are saying, oh, buy once, cry once. Buying once and crying once is great if you can afford to do it. So I'm trying to cater to everybody, and I'll show you here kind of how Sony jumps. So you have these Sony FDR AX53 4K Ultra Handycam, can run you about $848. Then you jump to some of these, and they get pretty expensive pretty quick. AX33 is a little more reasonable, and so on and so forth. I would settle on at least an AX33 or something along these lines. You don't need these commercial grade deals here, and these are great to have, but they're commercial grade equipment. If you're not going to be doing a commercial grade type show, you don't necessarily need that. But something like this right here at $698 plus your $300 mic setup, that's going to get you in the game, and that's going to keep you competitive. And then you have to invest in some Joby stands. So, and what do I mean by those? If you want to set your stuff up so it's not falling over and you're not leaning it against, small, like a stack of books or something, like your phone or anything else, you're going to want to invest in some of these Gorilla Pods. These can be super helpful in setting up your system, and they'll run you about $40. I recommend at least one for your phone, maybe, and definitely one for the camera. Okay? Especially if you're going to run a tabletop setup. It's good to have a few of those laying around and have the right shoes for them to set it all up. And they'll work. They'll work anywhere. I try to keep my kit a little bit mobile, a little bit able to go where I need it to go if it has to move. So that covers the mics, that covers mostly the camera. But can you get away with an inexpensive webcam? Yes, you can get a 4K webcam. You can do that. Is that going to hinder your performance or hurt your delivery? Yes and no. Again, now you're getting into pros and cons. It can become a travel system for you. You can use a GoPro. You can use the camera on your laptop. You can use a number of different things to support whatever it is you're trying to do. But you have to recognize its limitations. It's going to have limitations, whatever that is. Now, there's some really good webcams out there if you just search out webcam, okay? And we've all done it. We've looked at cameras. Anybody in media has looked at cameras. You get what you pay for with cameras a lot of times. But there's some great ones. I've heard great stuff about even these Razer webcams with the built-in lighting. There's some of these Logitech ones that are about $100 that can work really well. There's some of these ones that are conference cameras. There's all different kinds that can work. Okay? Some of these little smaller ones, that's $1,000 one, don't go by that. But you can make do with a lot of these different setups. And some of them are in Best Buy, and they're cool to mess around with. The limitation is going to be recording. You're not going to be able to back it up on a disc or on a chip, or you're going to have to probably pipe it into the computer and work out some system. As you progress in some of the best guys out there, they're really good at making everything almost like its own standalone system. And in making its own standalone system, that's where you get all the what I call redundancies. So like I can back up onto my camera, I can back up onto my mic system by recording it, and I record each of these onto the computer, and I use Restream, and we're going to get to that. How do we feed into the different platforms? I use software called Ecamm Live, and I use a Restreamer, and I use the Ultra Studio Mini Recorder. So I use a mini recorder to splice it. Now, what's a mini recorder? How does that play into all this? So a mini recorder, because I use a product, an Apple product, and I prefer to stream and use Apple products, the mini recorders are what's going to set you up to stream. So the Blackmagic mini recorder is what I use, and I'll show you guys what that looks like. And you can get that for about well, with the wire you're looking at about $200. So the Blackmagic mini recorder, it's available. I got mine on Amazon, and I'm going to show you. That's $145. And typically with that you need the Thunder cable so you can stream it in. But Blackmagic mini recorder, Thunderbolt is what I use. So when it's all said and done, $200 for the mini recorder with the Thunderbolt cable, your Joby Gorilla Pods, decent camera, decent mic, you can be at right about $1,000. Now your monthly fees to be doing this and to be streaming this and pumping this in and getting it out there into the blogosphere or YouTube space is what's going to start to cost you a few bucks. Now you can stream directly into YouTube. You can stream directly, work right with YouTube Creator Studio and go right into it. I recommend, at the very least, if you have Facebook, you have Periscope, you have some of these different platforms to utilize them to grow. If they're there, use them. And if you're going to record and you're going to do a tabletop type conversational piece, do it almost as a podcast, where you can put that information out there. Yep, content creation, because that will show. I agree. Hire someone that can create buckets and buckets and buckets of content. Barrels of it. There's 365 days a year. You need 360 posts on IG. You need YouTube. You need all of it. You need Twitter. You need all of it. And grow your brand. Grow your brand. Pay someone. Pay them well. They don't need to have a huge following like Jordan's saying, but they need to have enough. They need to understand it. They need to understand the space. But you know, I've looked at companies' books, and I'm sure Jordan has done this. I've looked at companies' books, and they give away, like, and Jordan's done this, they give away hundreds of thousands of dollars of product. I'm like, what does that cost you? And they're like, oh, you know, like 40 grand, but we got to get the stuff in people's hands. Or 50 grand. And I'm like, why not just hire someone? And you see, like, their mind blown. I'm like, why don't you give away less? Give away less and hire somebody. Bring someone in. Because half of the product you're going to give away, and Jordan will test this, the people will do fucking nothing with it. They'll never do anything with it. You know? It's crazy. Your return on investment should be data, content, people talking about the product. Pay someone well and have them create. Because something's better than nothing consistently. Something's better than nothing consistently and on a regular basis. Your grammar's fine, Jordan. You're making good points. You're making great points. But hire somebody that can deliver consistent media over and over and over again. Consistently. But, you know, it's like when I started this podcast, I went to a few companies and I said, look, just get behind this. I said, we're not going to do anything crazy. I'm not going to do anything nuts. It's going to be just more, I'll give you feedback on kind of how it grows and where things are at. And I'll give you clickable links and we'll do this and we'll do that. And it wasn't that exciting. But giving that whole let's give product away and pray crux, you may as well take the product and throw it in the river. At that point, and I've had that conversation with companies, you may as well take the product and throw it in the river. Throw it right in the river. It would do better there. It would raise the tide. It would do better. But don't, for 1 second, take the product and, in sponsorships, that whole ship, especially PRS. And if you're just in PRS, it's not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough meat on the bone. And if you're just trying to make it in government contracts, it's not enough. It's not enough. There's no way. No way. I've talked to companies about that. I've sat down with them. Where do government contracts go? The lowest bidder. The lowest bidder. It's not enough. There's not enough meat on the bone. There's not enough money there. Sorry. I know it. I've worked for 4 rifle companies. It's not enough there. I can tell you that. I don't know if Jordan can, but I can tell you that. There's just not enough there. Sorry. I'll be the bearer of bad news. You have to have more. I'll see you, brother. You gotta come on. We'll have some fun. This is the stuff people want to hear. See you, Jordan. Bearded Male. Give him a follow. But yeah, there's just not enough there. Fuck. Become a brand so big that people can't ignore you. Can't ignore you. And you'll get clients. You'll get stuff. But become a brand so big nobody can ignore you. That's number one. Get enough brand awareness out there. Develop. It's crazy.